Welcome back, folks, to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. Right now, we're going to kick it off and we're going to talk about our membership drive 2023 that's coming out for the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. That's right, Greg Eric. You can join NAILD as a lighting controls integrator. You can join NAILD as a darkness restoration and preservation advocate. And there may be a couple other categories, Greg. What do you think about all that?
I think it's new, exciting times for NAILD. It's not the same old organization you might have been used to. We've got a lot going on, a lot new, so you've got to be part of it. Have the distributor's voice heard. That's what NAILD's going to do for you. You might even get a cool hat like this if you keep it up.
A really cool hat like that. If we get 100 members, I'm going to buy everyone a proper hat like this. On today's show, we have Dr. Shelley James. She is an international expert on light and well-being, TEDx and keynote speaker, well advisor, and visiting lecturer at the Royal College of Art. She is also a trained glass artist and electrician. Wow. Not a lot of female electricians out there. Shelley is on a mission to inspire others to harness the power of the humble light bulb to be healthier, happier, and save the planet too. Clients include global lighting and technology brands, regulators, healthcare, and education trusts, architects, designers, academic institutions, and museums. A recent social media campaign to raise awareness of the impact of light on teens was translated into 3 languages and reached over 2.5 million young people around the world. Her recent TEDx talk was selected for the TED platform and has now reached over 170,000 views. But before we get to Dr. James, we got to talk light efficient design. Greg Garrett, go to led-llc.com for light efficient design. Love those guys.
That's right. We've got their LED linear stairwell strip and vanity fixture. It really covers all those applications. And you know what they do? They think about the contractor who's actually installing
Come on.
it.
Yeah.
Extra wide, 6-inch width cover to cover the old footprint. Have you ever seen that advertised? No.
Cover those ceiling scars, baby. We don't want those wall and ceiling scars. Cover them up. Go to led-llc.com. And I'm very pleased to speak with Dr. Shelley James, the second female electrician I've met in my life. Welcome to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here.
Go ahead. Yeah, Greg, you fire.
Yeah. Well, I want to start off with something that was in your bio, and a lot's talked about in lighting, and there's guides to lighting as the population ages, and it's always about the older population. You have something on teens here, and I've never talked to anybody that actually has studied that. So the younger population, what did you do, or give us more info on that?
So this all really started through lockdown when I saw my amazing nieces and godchildren indoors even more than usual, and I saw them beginning to really go downhill, even having more trouble than usual concentrating, feeling miserable. And I realized that they had no idea how important light was for them, particularly exposure to good quality light in the day and then switching off in the evening. And I reached out to scientists and neurologists all over, and manufacturers, people all over the world, to ask them what they knew about what's going on, because I knew from my own personal experience of extreme photosensitivity that the amount of light you get is a problem, or it can be a good thing. And they came back with some amazing information, and I started to work with a group of teens in Bristol as my kind of focus group. And together we came up with a concept, a little sort of series of videos. And initially I was doing sort of illustrations, and actually they went, nah, that's a bit babyish. They wanted something which looked like TikTok. They wanted something that was cool enough to share with their mates. And what I realized was how motivated they were by information which helped them to they were aware of depression, for example. So a video which showed how exposure to certainly at least half an hour, if not an hour of light a day can really help them to smile and feel better and survive. They understood
and
how
that's natural sunshine, natural daylight, right?
Ideally, it's natural sunshine, yes. And in fact, we know that daylight is thousands of times brighter than artificial light. And we also know that there are parts of the spectrum in daylight that simply aren't present in artificial light.
It's not the same thing. It's salt water and fresh water.
It's not the same thing.
Yeah, no, it's salt water. We can't mimic it. There's nothing we can do to. I don't believe. Well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Dr. Shelley James is going to correct me.
No, No, there isn't. I mean, it's like a multivitamin compared to a
Yes.
fresh apple. It's
Mhm.
you can kind of put the bits in, but there's something about that experience, not only of the vitamins in the multivitamin, but also the whole thing. So we know that if young people go outside, even if they're um, listening to their podcasts or chatting with their friends, they're at least getting some exercise. Their eyes are also getting some exercise, because that's one of the things that we don't realize, is that a young person's eyes grow by about 65% from when they're born until they're about 18. And like plants in the dark, if they don't get enough light during the day, they actually stretch. They go like a rugby ball shape, like a plant. They grow tall and spindly,
Sure.
and that leads to myopia. That leads to vision
Yeah.
difficulties later on. In fact, there was a tripling of preschool kids with myopia through lockdown, simply because they weren't getting as much exposure
Yeah.
to light. And there've been some lovely work about that. So
And
as
the
I
other
hear you
thing
chipping
too
in, so
is, I
I
mean,
can go on about this forever. So yeah.
the other thing too is, and I hear this, and there's so much in our world that we have created a presupposition for, which is completely false. One of them is that more light and glare equals more safety. Another one is like sunglasses prevent eye damage. That's actually not true. And sunglasses may be causing your seasonal affected disorder, actually. There's people that, get up in the morning, go down an elevator, get in a car from a parking garage, put on a pair of sunglasses, drive to another parking garage, and get in an elevator and go upstairs and never see natural light in their eyes. And so, yeah, there's a lot of those things. How do we help these young kids get outside? It seems like such a in part of me feels sorry for them. The other part of me thinks it's pathetic. Get the hell out of the
Well,
house, buddy.
well, I mean, I think a couple of things spring to mind. One of them is start them early. We know that 1 in 5 children will not actually go outside today at all. But the other thing to do is to show them, kind of set them by example, because 1 in 5, most adults don't go outside for more than an hour a day either. So if they see you outside, if they see you choosing to take your breakfast or drink your coffee or have a chat outside, even when it's cold, they see you wrapping up. They don't go, oh, you don't go, oh, it's cold outside. You go, hey, there's no such thing as bad weather. There's just bad clothing. Let's get out there. If they see you do that, then you set a good baseline for them. And then through their teenage years, they'll say, Dad, you're an old bugger, so leave me alone. But at least they'll have set the groundwork in the same way that you do with diet. So I think so one of them is set by example, the other is begin young, and the other, I think, what my experience of young people who are amazing, is to explain why. Because just saying go outside is one thing. Saying, did you know that if you go outside you sleep better, and then actually you can remember more of your studies? You can actually learn up to 40% more if you get a good night's sleep. So, and all kids want to kind of grow up, looking gorgeous, and we know that it improves their growth hormones. It improves their, or a number of things which contribute to how they look and how cool they feel. So if you give them some arguments which touch the things that matter to them, whether it be academic achievement or social achievement, or simply being able to kind of cope with sort of weight gain, all the things that happen through those hormone changes. If you explain to them how light affects them, then you start to see them going, yeah, I get that. And then you find them, I mean, certainly I've had adults around me say that their kids have been saying, Dad, turn that computer off, we're going outside, or stop checking your emails, it's time to switch off. There's no reason. You see parents with kids in restaurants checking their phones, and that sets a precedent for what kinds of interactions are possible in a relationship. So I think it's the onus is down to us grown-ups, actually, to show them and explain.
Can you give us more specifics on exactly how you got the message out? You said 2.5 million young people around the world saw this or heard this, or what?
Yeah.
Where do they see and hear it? What was the message?
So what I created a series. You'll find it. I created a little character, but actually, you'll find it there. There's a YouTube channel called with Luna, and I'll share a link to that. And so I created in collaboration with scientists and with my young people as my kind of making on my shoulder to make sure I didn't get boring and auntie-ish. We created a series of 30 to 40-second clips about 5 different topics. One of them was about myopia, about whether
Mhm.
you think you need you need glasses because your dad does, but actually you can reduce your chances by up to 40% if you get outside. So that's one.
Mm.
Another one is to do with sleep and remembering more. The other is to do with mood and just feeling better.
Mhm.
Another one is to do with sleep, and another one is to do with headaches, because a lot of young
Mm.
people experience headaches without really understanding why, and that's the quality of light in their spaces as well.
Mm.
So they're little. So we did a short version, and then I did a slightly extended one with a bit more information about what they can do about it. So, for example, the one about myopia. Well, actually, all of them have got information about how you can get a very simple app on your phone and walk around the room and see the numbers change. So you can use very simple wearable tech to check how much light is in different spaces where you might be in your space. And so they're little TikTok videos. They're very kind of very simple with
They're on
kind of bouncy
TikTok?
music.
They're actually on TikTok?
But no, they're TikTok style. In
Okay.
fact, we tried TikTok, but actually we found that YouTube worked better. And with
Mm.
I think we put in £1,000 worth of promotion, and it just took off because we weren't selling anything. I had three sponsors, three manufacturer sponsors who agreed to talk about solutions, not sales.
Mm.
And so their logos are just at the end saying "made thanks to," but no sense of if you buy this one you'll feel better. It was just these are the things that we as lighting professionals know can help you. So that's how that worked. And what's interesting is that we translated it. It was initially in English, and then we translated it into German and into
Mm.
Italian,
Mm.
because those were markets which were important to my sponsors. And
Mm.
actually, what was interesting was that when we started to put it into German teens, we had a 235% open rate on the
Wow.
video about sort of turning off blue lights after dark.
So
So
people are
it just
watching
goes
them
to show
more
that
than
they were watching.
once.
Exactly.
235% means they're watching them over again.
I know.
That's awesome. Wow.
No,
Well,
we were getting, yeah, the response rates were just phenomenal.
I think it like I don't know if you've ever heard of Dr. Jennifer Veach. She's a Canadian lighting scientist.
Yes.
Okay.
Amazing woman.
Yes. So we had her in studio here with me for a podcast. I mean, it's probably time to invite her back on, Greg. To be honest with you.
I would
She's
say so.
amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, she could come on every show, to be honest with you. But
Yeah, she
but
could.
I was talking to her, and it kind of occurred to us that at that point, 2019, I think it was, light was sort of coming to humans like fish figuring out they're in water or something. That's where we are right now with light, like understanding of light. We're just realizing that we're in water. And I think that what really needs to come from the lighting industry is that natural light and our electric light are not the same thing. It's like the ocean at a beautiful coral reef and a aquarium. That's how different the two things are. And that it's very, very important for people to have the sun shining upon them for every aspect of their life, their spiritual health, their mental health, their physical health, their eyesight, their relationships with other people are dependent upon being in natural light. And it's one of those things that it's like sleep. When people talk about circadian, the benefits of circadian lighting, the more alertness, all they're talking about is the results of better sleep. If you sleep better, that's what the result of circadian lighting is, better sleep. It's the natural light outside that's giving you all the other gifts and the circadian rhythm. And we have to get people to know that first. They don't even know that. Sorry.
Agreed. And you'd be amazed at how often I come into spaces and people go, "Really?" And they've
Mm-hmm.
got I'm working with a housing association at the moment, and a lack of awareness of just so there is the circadian, the sleep wake piece. There is also there are also other pathways which are biological or non-visual, which affect your alertness and your mood. And then there's
Mm-hmm.
another layer which is sort of cultural in a way, which is to do with going into a space which feels beautiful, which feels welcoming, which feels like it's set up for the kinds of things that you need to do there, whether that be a workspace or a space to rest
Mm-hmm.
or a space to socialize. So we're used to using lighting alongside other cues to create an expectation about what's going to happen there, and our body gets primed for that. So I think that the circadian lighting piece, and obviously the natural light, it's got so much, as you said, between the ocean and a bucket of seawater. It's a
Sure.
world. But when I work with people, I'm working with an old people's home, and they can't get as much of the ocean as we would like them to get. And what is so brilliant and inspiring is how there are now solutions available if we understand how to use them, and also how to switch them off, which begin to at least bring that bucket of water closer, because right now they're a long way away even from the bucket of water. They're kind of with a teaspoon. So I think that the first message obviously is natural light. It's the most sustainable, it's the most beautiful, it's the most life enhancing, it's it's like the fresh salad of light, or it's like the ocean of light. But I
Or
think
like the
it's
source
also,
of life on Earth, right?
yeah,
I mean,
it
it's
is, it
even deeper
absolutely
than
is.
that,
Yeah, yeah,
It's
it
like,
is.
people that say like it's not, there isn't a simile. It's like this is why there's life on Earth, because we're swirling
That's right.
around this nuclear fission reactor, and it's hitting us with energy, and we're taking that energy and we're eating it in the form of meat or plants. That's all energy from the sun,
Oh, you're so
and
right. You're so right.
it's like, this is something to be extremely grateful for. In fact, our
Mm.
ancestors commonly worshiped the sun. That was their
Yeah,
god, you know?
that's
And
that's very true.
we should maybe I have a religion, but if you don't have one, maybe choose the sun. But not a bad
Mm.
choice. Not a bad choice.
Uh, But I mean, every tradition which recognizes there are other ways of thinking about the world, um, recognizes that the cyclical quality of life,
Mm,
and whether it be every calendar has its sort of festival of light, it has its moments of darkness, it has that sense of contrast. I think the quality
mm,
of the dynamic quality of light is as it is equally important, particularly to our sensing system, because we're uniquely primed to notice change or
mm-hmm,
contrast. Our
mm-hmm,
visual system babies begin with noticing edges, before they notice really anything else, because it's the change that really counts, and our thresholds for change shift as we get older, or as we get more sensitive to different kinds of things. So I think that quality of change is also has a kind of philosophical, or a sort of a spiritual dimension, depending on how you want to look at it.
mm-hmm.
So you had kind of going back to the social media clips too. I like the topics, and the one my favorite is don't wear glasses like your dad. I don't know if it was titled that, but something along that line.
Yeah, it
I'm
was pretty
curious,
much.
was there yeah, was there one that was more popular than the others, or was it all encompassing, or were you not able to really track that?
I mean, actually, the one about boosting your memory, academic performance, was the
Right.
one that motivated the most. So because yeah, it's clear, and that was the one that particularly the German audience, we saw Australians and Indians, lots of, because you're able to, obviously Facebook allows you to break down the details. So we found that the one about I think the title is "Does Your Dad Nag You to Switch Off at Night?" And actually, for once, he's right. Um, this is why, and it's like a cup of coffee for your brain. So you need to kind of switch off 2 hours before, so that your brain can get on with the work it needs to do to learn your homework. And that's so that was the message that these young people found the most useful, and the most sort of relevant to their concerns.
One of the things that's absent from electric light is well, it's we have it now, the dynamism of the color. Okay, so the sun changes color. This is why I love to indulge flat earthers. I love a good flat earther. I love to talk to them because I always throw them this curveball. Like at the end, I said, well, you know what? Like maybe the earth is round, but maybe it doesn't revolve around the sun. Right. And I say, hey, how about that for a conspiracy theory? Right. And I hit them back. But this idea of these cycles of light, right? The idea, because it pretty much looks like the sun revolves around the earth. Like to me, there's no anecdotal evidence that the earth revolves around the sun. We're all believing that on faith. There's no evidence for it. It looks to me that the sun rises with a beautiful golden glow and cues life on earth to wake up. Here you go. I'm finished to the other side of the world, and now I'm here for you. and I want you guys to wake up. And then wake up more and more, and then it becomes very bright. And then slowly it starts to dim, and there's this cueing of life and telling life what to do on its little wet rock, right? And that's what happens, and it goes around us, and it like there's a cycle to that appears as if it revolves around us, and it acts as if it revolves around us. And I think that we should think that way, that in terms of the cyclical dynamic cueing nature of the sun is fundamental to life. And that's it. And whether that life lives at night awake or in the day awake or whatever it is, that cyclical nature, the incremental changing of the seasons, the march of the penguins, the flying of the birds, and all that sort of stuff is all because of the sun and its cycle. And maybe the moon's in there too, like a stir stick or
There
something.
it is. There it is.
You know what I mean? Like pulling the oceans back and forth for us or something like that. And these things, this light or whatever the hell this is, light, whatever it is magical. And that's the life force. And we need to have access to it as much as possible. I just have talked to so many people, and it just comes down to that, Dr. James, to me.
Yeah, and I think we ignore it at our peril, really, because I think
Yes.
we try and sort of we live with a wooden lid or plastic lid on top of even the bucket that we live in. So
Yes.
because and as we get divorced from that, I think there's a part of us which still responds to that, and certainly what's been interesting is seeing how artificial light at night or light pollution, even coming through curtains, it sort of begins to disrupt our ability to go into the deep sleep, the other sort of hibernation, the deep sleep that we need. So we've seen patterns of rise in Parkinson's, for example. When you map the light pollution across the states, you see a sort of a correspondence with degenerative diseases such as Parkinson's, and it's really remarkable. And we see also, you mentioned birds and animals, the way that when you mess with because light is so compelling, you kind of can't avoid responding to it at a very deep level. So when you mess with that, particularly plants and animals who kind of don't know that you just put an LED street lamp there. Yeah, we find just deep disruptions and deep sort of malaise, both in ourselves and in the plants and animals that we rely on for air and for food. And I think that's it's. I think you're absolutely right, that life force, that cycle, and also as it gets darker into the winter and then into the summer, there's some interesting work about seasonal affective disorder and how much of that is obviously to do with exposure to light, but also to do with how we experience darkness and how that the narrative around darkness, I think, can be part of the reason why we find winter so difficult.
Have you ever encountered the Canadian philosopher Marshall McLuhan? You know who that is? The
Yes,
media
I
is the
have,
message,
absolutely.
and he also said that's
Yes,
his
yes.
most famous one, and I totally agree with it. We could have a whole podcast on that probably, but the quote I'm thinking of here is, first we become what we behold. First we shape technology, then technology shapes us. And I even think, like, when I think about things like Twitter or Facebook or like, if you want to start a very successful social media company, you have to pick one of the 7 deadly sins and allow people to commit it online over and over and over again. So Twitter is rage, and Facebook is envy, and Instagram is vanity, and YouTube is sloth, and TikTok is sloth, and LinkedIn is greed, right? They have to grab one of those and run with it. But you could actually interpret those as forms of perverted light. Like, what you're looking at is a type of bad light that you have to get out of your life or something like that. And the discourse and the way it's used has to be bad because it's the wrong kind of light for humans to be observing. You understand what I'm saying? Or be enveloped by. That's what McLuhan is talking about. It shapes us back, right? So we become like that. Like and so I think that we have to think about light really as something we're surrounded with, like water and a fish. And back to that point. Do you agree with that, Dr. James?
I do. I think that's a really interesting way of putting it. I mean, I think, yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way, but there is a way in which the kind of glow that we get from those, with the sort of pulsing and the flickering and the timing that we get from those, are so unnatural and yet so compelling. I was sitting in a train yesterday watching somebody scrolling through social media. Somebody else was watching a film, and there was a complete. It was quite compelling. It was, but strange. So one of them was like seeing, yeah, it's triggering all the different parts of the central nervous system, which is triggered by different sorts of light source. And I hadn't thought of it that way, but also our relationship with light in those media types. So I was, you're always seeing people with doing selfies, and I was sort of trying to arrange the lights here. Our relationship with light, it's very unnatural how we aren't seeing ourselves and seeing each other in the way that we in relation to time and to place in the way that we would in the natural world. So I think I hadn't thought of it that way, but I think it's a very interesting point.
Another
Yeah.
way to, and Greg, I just want to stay on this path because there's two more points I think
Yep.
I want to unpack with Dr. James here. The first is that the other thing is, like, if we think about memory, and this is purely my observable experience, okay? When people do things in the type of light generated by devices, so say playing video games or being on social media, they have no memory of what happened during that time. But if people do things in natural light, they have very memorable experiences that they want to that get locked into their brains. And so if you meet someone who's a video game addict, like a teenager, and he's so aroused, right, by the video game, okay? His everything is going off. And I think we need to learn that arousal is not desire. It's not what we want all the time, just because it calls forth to us for attention, because it's like it's designed by the smartest people in the world. The smartest people in the world sit around and design social media and video games. Isn't that sad? Like, what a tragedy that is. Like, gross. The highest paid people in the world are basically making a new form of cigarettes or something, right? That's what's happening. It's gross. But anyway, like, how do we get away from this perverted light that we've have a horrible relationship with, Dr. James?
Well, I mean, I think you make some really interesting points there. I mean, one of them is to do with how our natural experience of an intense moment is located in time by the light or the dark around us in a more natural environment. We've been living with artificial lights for a while, so there are generations of memories made under artificial lights. I think it's to do with the quality of light that's coming from the screen, where we are disembodied. We are only seeing, I mean, I can only see down to the top of you as well. So there's a kind of a timeless and directionless experience of that space, which is which suspends so many other ways that we locate memory in space in time. Things like, what does it smell like? What is it? There are other forms of sound, other forms of touch, other forms of movement that are simply we're just living with the visual cortex and the executive function, rather than a completely fully embodied experience. And there's some lovely work on something called the canny or uncanny principle, which is how much of an experience needs to feel immersive in a multisensory way in order for us to kind of log it as something which is true. So I think that relationship with the kind of a patch of light in the middle of darkness, with which just basically goes down to our chest, is very it logs a particular kind of memory, but not the kind of embodied memory that allows us to retrieve it in particular circumstances. I think so that people suspend time, and I've got some particularly young men around me who spend their lives sitting on a cushion in the living room, just kind of blowing other people up around the world, and he comes out of that from time. He's very immersed, and I think he's getting better at the games. He's killing more people. What he thinks is happening, or who he thinks he's playing with, is another matter. So I think, so how we wean ourselves off. I mean, it is how do if anybody's ever tried to come off coffee or salt or sugar or fat for a while, you'll know it's got to hurt. I mean, there's got to be a reason why you do it. And I think that's and at the moment, when we don't offer our young people anything much else, or ourselves much else, actually, for that
Mhm.
fact, then it's hard to kick the habit. People tend to kick cigarettes or go on a diet when they when they're getting married, or they kick cigarettes when they get a diagnosis or something. So I think we need to make the alternative better than this very addictive alternative reality. Once there's something better to do, particularly I know that the young people around me, if you offer them a conversation at the beginning, they go, "Oh, whatever." But actually, that is the best as far as they're concerned. If you pay them some real attention, that's going to eventually invite them to a different set of choices, and it's the same with us. So so I think that my sense is that any choice, because it's addictive, yes, it's the kind of it's the adrenaline rush of just a second. I'd lock the door. It's the adrenaline rush of our world, but you only kick that if you have a reason to do that, and if you understand the damage it's doing. So that's yeah, that would be my response.
Mm. You're up,
Did you
Greg
do your
Eric.
two? Yep.
Yeah, I
Okay,
did
here
my
we go.
two. You're up.
All right. So, so we all agree that going outside is good,
Yep.
and that's what you've talked about as a first point. But you wrote on your website too here that I read that 80% of the people buy lights for places we spend 90% of our lives and have absolutely no training at all. How do we change that? What do we do
Yeah.
about the interior lighting to make it better?
I mean, that's something I'm doing a bit of a pincer movement on that. So
Mm.
one of the when I speak to people who make lights and try and sell them, they say, well, nobody wants to pay anymore. So then I speak to the clients and say, if you knew that this could improve the bottom line, yeah, it might cost a bit more up front, but it would improve the bottom line. Would you be interested? And they go, yeah. So I've been finding people around the world who are doing that, who are saying, I can see why it's good value, even spending more upfront, and starting to kind of showcase those. So in the care sector, particularly, but also in education, in workplace. So I'm on the one, but so I'm finding people who paid more and can see why, and that's giving courage and incentive to those who haven't decided to do that yet. That's something to ask for. What I've also been doing is talking to the lighting manufacturers, because they might a lot of the people who sell lights don't necessarily understand what the possibilities are either. And they sort of talk a good game about circadian lighting, but don't necessarily understand the possibilities and limitations of that. And let's face it, a lot of their business has been built on shifting boxes. So it's going to be hard for them to come up to be interested in a more, I suppose, sophisticated approach, which involves saying who is the user, what do they need, how does this tie into an overall system, which begins with daylight. So then we've got regulators. I've also worked with a big construction company here in the UK to help their specifiers and engineers understand what the possibilities are and why you would move away from the standard cheap grid. And as an electrician, I can speak to contractors and say, this, it doesn't need to be more complicated if you get it right at the up front. So it's an ecology. We know that the value chain for lighting is a complicated one and is driven, as all industries are, by but the shift I'm looking for is from cost to value. And once you begin to describe that, then all kinds of other sorts of pieces of the puzzle come into play. Does that answer your
And
question?
yeah, it does. And I might know the answer to this, or I think I'm going to know. But is it come down to the design of the lighting, or how you lay it out, or is it the fixtures themselves, or a combination of both in terms of
I mean, I
getting
think
quality light?
it's to getting quality light. I mean, the first thing is you have to work out who it's for. So a warehouse needs different light to an old people's home needs different light to a school, particularly a school for special needs. So the first thing you need to think about is what or who is the lighting for and when, and that out of that will come a series of a specification or a set of needs, and there's a sort of basic needs to meet the basic specification, the regulations, the number of light, the lux on the desk, and all of that sort of stuff. And then there's that additional ocean quality, which is how do you make what do you do, and that's where the magic of a designer comes in. Is how do I use light in this space to create something which is joyful and sustainable and efficient and easy to use and easy to keep using over time. So sustainability, the right to repair, the ability of different sorts of users to actually interact with the switches and the buttons, because very often that's a barrier to that kind of more sophisticated approach. So it begins with who's it for, who's the user, and then works back into the kind of layers of functionality into like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Really, you begin with the basic, and then if you can, you move into joy and wonder, really, which light has the offer to do.
Mm.
And you talked to some of your background kind of at the beginning. Mike mentioned it too, but electrician. You were an electrician. You are an electrician. What's the background there?
So I'm a trained electrician, up to level 3 here in the UK, which means I know I'm trained to put the cables in. I'm not trained to sign them off, because that was another world of training and qualifications, which I realized I didn't need in order to achieve what I wanted to achieve. And what I wanted to achieve was two things, really. One of them is I trained, my first degree was in textiles, and then I trained as a printmaker, worked in branding, and then trained as a glass artist. Did my doctorate at the Royal College of Art on optical illusions and optics and perception. And I started to experiment with light and glass, particularly glass which changes color in different light, and came and realized that I wanted to make an installation at the Saatchi Gallery, which with different with light bulbs which looked the same but actually had different spectral distributions, and it made the color, the artwork look a different color. It was a piece about uncertainty, and I couldn't find an electrician to help, and I kept on going around all these trade sort of trade parks, and they go, "Oh, love, oh, you don't want that one. Oh, you don't." Oof. And then I said, "Well, could I try it?" They go, "No, you got to take it home, and if you've taken it home, you can't bring it back." So I thought, this is crazy, and I found somebody to help me, but it was at the very last minute and very stressful. I thought, well, this really isn't rocket science. I can do it myself. So I went to train as an electrician, and I set up a light
Mm.
library for other artists and makers so that they could avoid the pain and environmental impact of buying the wrong stuff, so they can see whether they want a panel, whether they want it what beam angle they want, how they can deal with the dimming, how they can deal with security,
Mm.
and so that I could support people to kind of have a more creative and more sustainable attitude to bringing light into other situations. So I still work. I still do through lockdown. I worked for a local electrician's firm pulling cables, and that was a great way of getting out of the house. And I do pat testing. I work with. I've just done an installation, sort of an experiment installation with a couple of weeks ago with with a team here in the UK. So it continues to be something that I love. And the other thing that's great about it is that when somebody says, "Oh, forward voltage. Oh, you need got some voltage drop there, late. Ooh," and I go, "Actually, I've just come back from a project to light a sculpture on the river just here," and I said, "Oh, volt drop, forward voltage." I said, "Yeah, okay." I could do that
Mhm.
calculation. Thanks very much. And it's just really nice to kind of go, yeah, you don't need to try and bluff me with that. Let's have a proper conversation about what's possible, but don't
Sure.
go technical. So that's
I love it.
and they
That's
go,
great.
it just kind of
That's great.
Nice. And then one other thing I
so
saw
that's the
too.
background.
I like that. You have a unique background, and we're kind of going in some reverse order, but that's what happens sometimes when we have discussions, and just where your passion from lighting comes, and quality lighting and everything you're doing. You mentioned in your bio on your website that you had a traumatic head injury and extreme
Hmm.
photosensitivity. Can you touch? Is that where
Mm.
how you got into lighting, or is that where it comes from?
Uh, Kind of. I mean, I was born in
Okay.
Jamaica, and I lived all over the world, and I was really aware when I come back from traveling somewhere. We lived in Africa, come back, land at Heathrow, gloomy, gloomy, gloomy grey. It was like, and my
Mhm.
whole system went, oh, it was like kind of putting your head in a bag, or kind of having gone from being in the ocean to kind of being left with a bucket. It's like, how am I gonna survive this? And so I did my first degree in textiles in Paris, and did my thesis was about the color forecasting industry, and went around Europe looking at different colors and different the way that climate affects our choice of colors in fashion. And then I worked in branding, so I worked with big organizations, helping them to think about how they can create environments and packaging to reflect who they are. I worked for Shell, I worked for Visa International, I worked for all kinds of big organizations on color palettes and stuff, and I did lots of consumer research around that. And then I fell off my bike and I banged my head, and basically my brain swelled up inside, and all the dials in the brain just kind of, all the things which normally tune things out or help you to kind of settle down again, didn't work anymore. So I spent a number of years in a dark room with the help of a neurologist and a number of others, including my amazing partner too, just kind of work out how to twiddle those buttons again. And so one of the things that was, I lived with a tinfoil on the windows, and because I just kind of couldn't cope with bright light, and certainly anything with lots of light moving around was a problem. So then when I was strong enough, I set up a residency at the eye hospital. Sort of, I thought, I've been playing with this stuff, trying to get people to buy things all my life, and now
Oh,
I want to really, I understand how it works in a different way. So that's what started this funny little pathway, really.
that's unique. I saw that and I was like, oh, there's got to be something more to that. And a couple of years though, huh? That's in a, jeez.
Well, it was actually 5 years altogether, kind of step by step, yeah.
Wow.
But the longest journey starts with the first step, doesn't it?
Yes. And what do you have planned for the future? Anything new that you got in the works that you're working on?
Ooh, what am I working on? I'm working on a book.
Yes.
Because so many people say, "How does this stuff work?" So I'm
Mhm.
working on a book. I'm working on a very simple course for specifiers and engineers. So it's just kind of what is this thing people keep on talking about? What does that mean? What does that mean for systems design, particularly because the light bulb in a well designed building or system really is, it's like the steering wheel on an engine. You do need, everything else needs to fit together. So I'm doing that. I'm working with a housing association and an amazing lighting design company to look at how we can improve the quality of lighting in in housing, so in sort of housing which is generally specified with very little care for the visual comfort, let alone the sort of health and well-being of it. I mean, it's basic, and how can we make some small changes to improve the quality of the lighting there, and make it more sustainable. I'm set up a PhD with Oxford University and an elder care home in the UK here, and part of that has grown into a series of international sort of innovations in healthcare conversations between scientists, people like Shada Brahman in Harvard and Russell Foster here in the UK and others, to talk about what we know about how lighting affects us, and then to talk to healthcare providers from around the world who are actually doing it, and then finding, because what we find is that scientists talk in their bubble and people buying light bulbs for an old people's home are in a different bubble, and
Mhm.
finding a way for them to understand the value from a perspective which isn't, it's sponsored by some care home magazine, trade magazines for care homes, and by trade magazines for lighting professionals, and by lighting manufacturers. The aim is to kind of create a space for an impartial, positive conversation about what can be done for people who don't have much choice about going outside. So those are a few things on the list. I'm
Yeah.
setting up a similar thing for young people and special needs in the spring as well. So
Mm.
yeah, a few things on.
So it's interesting that this we've almost trapped ourselves or something with our innovations. It's almost like
Hmm.
we've worked our way into a trap that we're
Hmm.
having a hard time getting out of. Dr. Shelley James, it's been a wonderful pleasure to have you on the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. Is there any final thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience before we start getting a little bit crazy with light efficient design, Greg Eric? But I'm going to hold back for a second here and let Dr. James just.
I mean, I think the first thing to think about is just, the great thing about podcasts as a medium is you can listen to it outside. So my first
Mm,
encouragement would be to take this outside.
mm,
I think the other encouragement would be for you to have a look around and realize just how much control you've got over the situation you're in. You can move closer to the window. You can improve the quality of your light. I was always told not to fiddle with the lights, but actually, in today's lighting world, you absolutely should and must fiddle
mm,
with the lights to make sure they're
mm,
comfortable for you. And then the third thing is really make sure you switch them off. And I think the other thing to mention is just what a privilege it is to be part of this conversation, because I love the way that you bring in sort of a bigger, you put all about the philosophy of light and our relationship to light in a very different way. And I really, really love that. And so it's a real privilege to be here. Thank you.
Well, it's a full blown love affair. So we love it too. But Greg, we got to talk about the membership drive, and I love incremental improvements, and I think that's what Dr. James was just referring to. Greg Eric is that, hey, start making little improvements and see what happens. If you can improve your mark in math by 1% a month by grade 12, it's a 90%. Right?
Yep.
Let's do incremental. So we want to grow this association one member at a time, Greg Eric. And we're calling to you. What do we got for 2023, this membership drive for NILD?
We've got a lot in the works, and it's exciting times. We're getting into research even. We can talk about that. We're doing a convention again. We've got all sorts of communications, education courses. Everything you need to be better at lighting, NILD is doing for you. So be ready for it.
And we're gonna be the starting point of a Lighting Controls Integrators Council. This is gonna be an amazing career, folks. If you young people out there listening to this, being a lighting controls integrator is going to be a super fun, highly paid knowledge worker job. So you can start that with the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, and of course, we give thanks to Light Efficient Design LED-LLC. Greg Eric, what do you got, bud?
They're thinking of electricians like Dr. Shelley James here to make the life easy. Flex color, flex watt, so you don't have to worry about that when you get on site. If they don't like the color, you switch a button. They also have in their LED stairwell fixture that extra wide footprint to cover the old wall scars, and great sensors that can bi-level dim, full dim, whatever you need to do with modern end caps, security end caps, everything fancy you need to make it a good quality fixture.
And of course, Dr. Shelley James. She's available on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, ageofinnovations.com, all listed on the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast website. But of course, you, the listeners. That's right. We love you guys. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.